Hello, friends. It's me, your chess boyfriend. I found this cute little chess puzzle a while back, and yes, it is a cute little chess puzzle. And I saw it posted, and it took me a few minutes to figure it out. But when I did, I was absolutely delighted. So, some of you may not know what a chess puzzle is. Well, a chess puzzle is a position in a chess game that's been set up specifically to show you or teach you something. Sometimes they come from real games, and sometimes they are simply theoretical positions that somebody just arranged on a board to make whatever point that they are trying to make. Now, sometimes they simply say, find the best move, and sometimes they give you little hints or let you sort of know what tactics to look for. So in this case, I am going to set the scene a little bit, and then I'm going to tell you what's going on. And if you like, after that, you may go ahead and pause this video and see if you can solve this puzzle. And if not, that's fine. I'll just explain it to you. So in chess, we say white to move. And what that means is the player with the white pieces, it's their move next. So in other words, you are assuming control of the white pieces at this point. And the situation is very strange. It, in some ways, looks quite bad for white. Because as you can see, white, you only have your king and your bishop. Whereas black has 5 pawns and also the king and the bishop. And if you're not that familiar with chess, why that's bad is black has the opportunity to push their pawns down the board and make them into queens. And if black is able to do that, it is essentially game over for white. But what I can tell you about this is what you see right here, which is this #2 is chess notation for mate into. So in other words, if white finds the best moves, it doesn't matter what the player with the black pieces does, white is going to win in 2 moves. So typically, when you first look at a chess puzzle, what you want to do is look for forcing moves. This is how people who play chess seem to calculate many moves in advance. So you've heard like, oh yes, chess players, they can more or less see the future. They can understand what their opponent is going to play and predict it and see all these moves into the future. Well, that's very true in some cases, especially with some grandmasters, but like most tricks, once you know how it's done, it's not quite as impressive. So in this case, what we say when we are looking for forcing moves is we are looking for checks, captures, and attacks or threats. So check, most people are familiar with anytime that one of your pieces is threatening your opponent's king. So one thing that we know is that kings cannot put each other in check, the reason being that if my king is next to your king, then your king can take my king, and then if you put your king next to my king, I can take your king. So it's just not allowed. It's illegal. It's a idea called opposition. So for instance, if I wanted to make that move, the computer wouldn't let me. In fact, if I try and do it right now, it's going to say, nope, not allowed. In fact, when I turn the piece on, or click on it, I'm not turning it on, it shows you these are the only legal moves for that piece, because that puts me in opposition with the other king, and the pawns for the black pieces have those two squares guarded, so I can't move there. So, since we know that the king can't put the other king in check, that leaves us only the one piece to worry about. So in some ways that makes it very easy. All we have to worry about is, what checks can the bishop give? Can the bishop give any checks? Well, yes it can. It can give this check. So if it takes this pawn, then the king is in check. And as we know, the enemy king can't move next to our king, so they can't take it with the king, and the king can't move. Which would be great, except the problem with all that is, if I take that piece, black simply recaptures with their piece. So you see the problem. Once this bishop is gone, black can again advance the pawns down the board, create a queen, and put white in checkmate. So we have no checks. Do we have any captures? Well, we already know we can't make that capture because of the king. Then if we look at the dark squared bishop, go as far as they can in any direction. The only capture they have is this capture, which we already know is not a good move. So what are we looking to do? Well, the idea here is we need to get this bishop to move somehow. Because once that bishop moves, let's say if the bishop moved to here, for instance, well, then we would be able to take that pawn and put the king in check, and we would win the game. That would be checkmate. But how do we do that? What do we do to get this bishop to move? Now, there's some techniques called distraction, for instance, where we would put our bishop there and sacrifice it to move the black bishop. But the problem with that is, of course, we would lose our bishop. There's no way to guard it. So you kind of see some of the problems here. So if you would like to, feel free to pause the video at this point. I'll give you a few seconds to do so, and see if you can figure out what move you play, because there's only one move that you can do to get checkmate in 2. What move should you play to get checkmate in 2? Okay, so hopefully, if you decide to pause the video, you were able to find it. And if not, I'm going to give you the answer now anyway. So, the only move that allows you to get checkmate in 2 is this very strange looking move, bishop to b2. And you might look at that and say, well, that doesn't do anything. That doesn't move the bishop. What is the point of this move? Well, the interesting thing is it actually does move the bishop. Why is that? Well, you've got this little chain, this little centipede of pawns on the side here, and none of them can make a move. Okay, so none of those pieces can make a move. Well, what about the king? Well, the king can also not make a move, because we said opposition. It's not allowed. Okay, well, this pawn can't advance because the bishop's in the way. So I advance this bishop down the board and turn him into a queen, right? Well, no, because in chess, you are not allowed to put your king in check. And if you move this pawn, the bishop puts the king in check. So you are in this strange situation if you are the player with the black pieces, where your only legal move is one with the bishop. And it doesn't matter where you move the bishop. That allows, just to show, checkmate. Isn't that sort of a neat puzzle? The way that it's like, it doesn't matter what black does. And this is a term most commonly used in chess, but also in other games. It is a German word, and it is Zugzwang. Yes, I know, it's fun to say, Zugzwang. And what that means, it's one of those charming German terms that you have to explain because there's no real translation for it directly, is it doesn't matter what move you make, you are going to end up with a worse position. It's kind of a sad term when you think about it. So in games like chess, where you can't pass your turn, because if we go back to the beginning, if I make this move right here, black would love to say pass. Black does not want to make any of these moves because, as I said, all of these moves result in bishop takes g7 checkmate. But black is not allowed to pass his turn, or their turns, I should say. So the player with the black pieces has to make this move that puts them in a worse position. And that is Zugzwang. So this is just sort of a cute little version of it that shows you in no uncertain terms what that looks like. In different parts of the game, it would be a little bit more complex than that. It would be these subtle little, oh, well, if the player with the black pieces moves this pawn or moves this piece, it puts them in a worse position. And so they would end up with a situation where they are sitting there thinking, well, I would love to make a move, but all of them are bad. This is a way of illustrating the concept of Zugzwang, where it's very obvious how this is bad for the player with the black pieces. So that's the basics of it. The only other thing I wanted to show you, because someone made the comment that was very silly, but there's actually another way for the player with the white pieces to win. Now, I was not tricking you. I said that there was only one move that allowed for checkmate in two. But there are moves that allow for checkmate in more than two. What do I mean? Well, what if you go bishop to a1? You make that move. Well, again, the player with the black pieces can't move. Definitely can't move the king 2 spots, but anyway, they can't move those pawns, can't move this pawn, can't move this pawn, can't move this pawn, and of course, they do not want to move the bishop, so what do? Well, they make the only move that's not one of those moves, which is advancing the pawn one piece. And white goes, nom 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 nom, and eats the pawn. Yes, that's what happens. Hum. That pawn is consumed. And then again, don't want to move any piece except the pawn again, so b3. And white again goes back, and black moves the pawn forward, and hum, and that pawn is gone too. And then b4, and then white can move the king. White can move other pieces, but just to show, white moves the king. That still keeps opposition, right? Black moves the pawn forward. White moves back. The player with the black pieces advances. And hump. And we end up in this position where, again, the only legal move that the player can make is moving the bishop somewhere. And no matter where they choose to do that, we get checkmate. So anyway, that is the very silly way that you can turn mate in 2 into mate in 8 moves if you are so inclined. Well, anyway, I hope this was kind of fun, or at the very least made you smile. And this is me, your chess boyfriend, signing off.